I think one of the interesting things there as well is housing. And one of the
Housing, yeah.
frustrations I've had in this debate is, there are those who will say, oh, well, stop scapegoating migrants for the housing shortage. And the point is, it's not the migrants themselves. I mean, of course, if you had the opportunity to come to Australia, of course, you'd take it. The problem is the lack of planning that's been there. And it's just so obvious that it's supply and demand. Like, yes, there's a supply issue where I think the time taken to build a new house has increased by 50% over the last decade. And a big part of that is the red tape and other non-government issues like getting resources and the actual people to do the job. But there's no doubt that pumping up demand has also increased the price. And it's so frustrating to me that the trope used by the apologists is, oh, well, you're just blaming migrants. And I just want you to sort of tell us, just talk to us about the housing story, because that's something that touches the lives of every single Australian, particularly young Australians who want to be able to buy a home.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, this is purely a numbers game, right? So if you're going to, basically, if you want to solve this structural housing shortage that we've got, you need to run a migration system that is below the nation's capacity to build housing and infrastructure. Because infrastructure is also, fundamental as well. It goes hand in hand with housing. Unfortunately, we've run a migration program since really the mid-2000s. So Shane Oliver did some fantastic work, whereby, from 2005, when Australia's population suddenly population growth jumped by, 150,000 after we ramped up immigration, we never had the housing supply to respond to that. And as a result, Shane Oliver estimates that we've got a 200 to 300,000 housing shortage, cumulative. And in fact, during COVID, when immigration went negative for a bit, the housing shortage went down a lot. This is a structural housing shortage. Now, people often say, oh, but prices went up because interest rates are obviously cut to close to zero. That's a separate issue. But the biggest area in the housing market where you see the shortage is actually the rental market. And in the last 5 years, according to Cotality, which is a housing data provider, they estimate that the median asking rent in the last 5 years has gone up by about $10,400. So, if you're a renter, if you're a median renter in Australia, you're now paying roughly $10,500 more than you were 5 years ago, which is a massive increase. We're paying a record amount share of income on rents now in Australia,
and you're not getting anything better. It's still the same place.
Yeah, that's it. So this is a direct thing. And here's the thing, Dan. So the National Housing Supply and Affordability Council is the federal government's own advisory council on housing supply and affordability. They released their State of the Housing Market report 2 months ago, and what it showed is that over the next 5 years, over this 5-year housing accord period, Australia's shortfall of housing is going to increase by 79,000. So that's because we've got this ongoing high immigration, and that's using the budget's forecast of immigration, not the higher level that we're actually at. Yeah. But even with the budget's forecast, which is probably, conservative, let's be honest, the housing shortage is going to get worse by 79,000. And here's the rub. In the sensitivity analysis at the end of that report, they said that if population growth was merely 15% less than is estimated projected in the budget, instead of having a 79,000 shortage over the next 5 years, we'd actually have 40,000 surplus over the next 5 years. And that tells you in black and white, in the federal government's own advisory council, that the number one solution to this is to cut population growth. And the way you do that is through immigration. So what I don't understand is their own advisory council in their sensitivity analysis says, here's option A, status quo. You're going to have a worsening housing shortage of 79,000 homes on top of the 200,000 to 300,000 already. Or option B, slow population growth down. And over the next 5 years, with just 15% less, which just means still very strong population growth, just 15% less strong, you, instead of having a 79,000 shortage over the next 5 years, you have a 40,000 surplus. So that is the way you solve the problem here. You slow demand by slowing population growth. It's the easiest thing to do. It's also the most logical thing to do, especially when every opinion poll pretty much in the last decade shows that people don't support this.